Speaking of which, joining us now in the Element Well studios, Auditor Shad White is with us. Thank you for coming on there, Auditor.
How you doing, brother? Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I'm doing great.
I know Friday Eve, is that what you call it?
Friday Eve is what we call it. So I'm going down to be with the Corner Market folks. Looking forward to broadcasting remotely the show there, and then headed down to see the Journey concert in New Orleans tomorrow night. So
that's why we were playing Journey. Okay.
Well, that's our bumper music at the top of the hour.
I was trying to figure out why Wheel in the Sky related to me. I'm not going to get into it. I'll just take it as a given.
It's
that's
a computer. It's automatic.
That's right. Okay, I got you.
So you have taken an interest in something that is near and dear to my heart, and that's the brain drain, as it is described in the state of Mississippi. You have done some research on that. Your office has. You have published some reports on that, and I think it says what a lot of us already knew, but you've just got the actual data. I mean, you've actually gone out and interviewed and collected data to put it into mathematical perspective for us. It is a concern, and I'll start with this. This is a statement and a concept I've shared on the air, on the show quite a bit, Shad, which is if you think about our K through 12 education, public education in the state of Mississippi, I think it's fair to say that has improved.
Yes.
If you look at the various key metrics on that, we've improved in that arena. And K through 12 education, for the most part, is geared to prepare a student for a career in college. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So they go to college, and then they leave.
Yep.
So while I think it makes sense, and we should certainly celebrate our successes in K through 12, from a taxpayer perspective, and I don't want to sound like that I'm entitled to anything as a taxpayer, because I don't believe that, but I'm saying from a taxpayer perspective, where's the return on that investment?
That's right.
And we're not getting a return if we're doing great in the classroom K through 12, only to have those students graduate from our fine universities and seek work and set their lives up out of state. We're subsidizing the other states.
That's right. That's exactly right. It's human capital, and we're shipping it to other states. So that was really my concern as state auditor. Is I wanted to know what the taxpayers are investing in higher education, and are we getting a return? That's a fundamental question that a state auditor can get into. So we started looking at it, and even by conservative estimates, we can tell you that between 2015 and 2018 or so, the state spent between $1.5 and $2 billion on higher education, and yet for the kids, the students who were graduating in that time frame, 3 years later, only half of them were working and living in Mississippi. Yep. The other half were gone. Even if you just looked at Mississippi natives, the numbers don't get much better. So when you think about that, if you're getting a half return on your investment, that's not great. It's like you going out and saying you're going to buy 10 trucks for your business, and then when delivery day comes, only 5 trucks show up. That's not a good outcome for us. And my big concern, aside from just the ROI for the taxpayers, the return for the taxpayers, my big concern as a Mississippian is that this is going to affect all of us. So I increasingly talk to grandparents who are growing old, not seeing their grandkids, because their kids have moved off to New York or Chicago or Dallas or wherever else. I increasingly talk to nursing home CEOs, hospital CEOs who will tell you we have a nursing shortage right now, and it is only going to get worse 10 or 15 years from now, and the elderly in Mississippi are not going to get the care that they need because we're unable to keep folks with healthcare-related college degrees here in the state of Mississippi. Yeah. And as you know, as an entrepreneur, if we don't have entrepreneurs here, if we don't have skilled workers, college-educated workers, we're not going to create new businesses here in Mississippi. We're not going to be able to attract new businesses. We already know when you talk to companies who are looking at coming to Mississippi, one of the biggest hangups they have is they're concerned about not having enough skilled workers. This is a big, big deal for Mississippi, and we got to figure it out or we're going to be in trouble in 10 or 15 years. Yeah,
totally agree. And when the population skews more towards the aged, towards the mature,
right,
which is what happens here as well, they retire out, and they're not working, and we need working people to keep the economy humming.
That's right.
And we're seeing this problem, by the way, in Japan. If you've been keeping up with that, it's incredible how they're seriously concerned about their economy imploding because of the age of their population, the average age, and in particular the median age keeps going upward. So we're a kind of a microcosm of that. That's just one of the aspects. But you're so right about. Whereas the auditor typically, when you're performing audits, you're focused on more the quantitative aspects of the entity. This is a qualitative issue.
It's both.
It's both.
It's exactly both.
And they translate and they align, and they're inextricably linked at the end of the day.
That's right. Well, just to go back to the numbers too. We know that Mississippi is one of 3 states to have lost population in the last 10 years. It's us, West Virginia, and Illinois. And if you dig into that data, you'll see that we've lost about 10% of the millennial population. So when I say that, I'm talking about people born between 1981 and 1996 or so. And we're losing the young folks that we've produced, many of them skilled workers or college-educated workers. And so then we're left with the older generation who will be leaving the workforce and need care in their older years. And this is going to be a challenge. It's going to be a huge challenge for us, and we've got to figure out a way to fix this. One thing that we did in the report is to assert this idea that public universities have a public responsibility back to the taxpayers of the state.
Totally agree.
They have to do stuff to help the state of Mississippi because we are subsidizing those universities. And I can't think of a more important thing they could do to help Mississippi than to keep their graduates, the work product, here. So we actually went through and we ranked the universities in Mississippi by how well they were keeping Mississippi natives here. We took out out-of-state students who were at these schools, and we just looked at Mississippi natives, and then we said, how well are you doing at keeping your Mississippi natives here? We've got some schools that are doing great. UMC Medical Center is keeping a ton of their folks. We've got some schools that are not doing great. My alma mater, your alma mater, the University of Mississippi, ranks at the bottom of that. I can tell you a story real quick from yesterday. I spoke to 200 accounting seniors at Ole Miss, and I did a little show of hands. I said, okay, if you're not from Mississippi, raise your hand. About half the hands went up. From Mississippi, about half the hands went up. So I said, okay, you're seniors. You probably have plans about what you're doing next. Raise your hand if you're leaving Mississippi. Almost every single hand went up. I said, okay, raise your hand if you're staying in Mississippi. I can tell you, just based on a rough count, 200 students in the room, about 7 raised their hand. That shows you, that's a decent sample size too, 200. That backs up what we're seeing with the overall data. That's going to be dangerous for the future of Mississippi if we can't keep some of those folks here.
So all of that investment is just walking out of the room and crossing our borders into the other states at the end of the day.
That's right.
And the employers in the other states are saying, thank you, Mississippi, for preparing our workforce.
Yeah,
essentially, that's what's happening.
That's right. And you might get some of these folks to do the boomerang thing. Yeah. So that's what I did. A lot of us did. Yeah. So I graduated from Ole Miss. I left. I lived in Washington, D.C., England, and Massachusetts for a little while, and then I came back because I wanted to raise my family here and wanted to be near family, wanted to make a difference in Mississippi. Yeah. So I made this sales pitch to these students yesterday. I said, okay, a bunch of y'all are leaving. Remember these things that I'm telling you. You can have a great quality of life here in Mississippi. There are jobs available for people with your skills here in Mississippi. You will make less than you make in New York, but you can afford more here. And when you start to have kids, your commute time, your distance from your family, from your parents, is going to matter a whole lot more than it matters right now. So in 5-10 years, when you think about when you're sitting at work and you're thinking, I'm kind of miserable in this cubicle in Dallas, come back to Mississippi. That's one way we can get folks re-engaged here in the state.
I'll tell you, it is that what you just described is the exact thought process I went through over 40 years ago.
Yep.
Left, thought the same thing. Let's see, I want to start a family. I want a quality of life. I don't want to fight this rat race in the big cities.
The scary thing is, if you look at the data, we're not getting the boomerangs. We've got some of them, but it's getting worse over time, actually.
We got a break right here. You can hang around.
Yes, sir.
We're going to talk some more to Auditor Shad White in the Element Wealth Studios. We are in the Element Wealth Studios on this
Friday Eve.
And we're talking to the state auditor of the great state of Mississippi, my friend Shad White. So we're just talking about the brain drain. I know that your office has initiated a focus on that, and I appreciate that because you and I were just talking off the air. The most important thing is we got to at least start talking about this.
That's right. Yeah.
And it doesn't get a lot of attention. There's some auditor that still say, oh, that's just a ruse. That's not really a problem. But you have collected the data that I think clearly validates and confirms that we do have a problem. I think most clear-eyed people, if you go talk to parents, and I know you have, it's a concern. Gee, I'm so afraid we're going to go up, our children, and get this great education. They're going to move out of state, and we're not going to see them again. They all have that concern. If you went around and addressed a group of parents with high schoolers,
that's right,
they'll tell you that's a concern.
I hear that over and over again. I talk to hundreds of business owners every single year. The thing I hear most frequently when I ask them, what's the biggest problem you're facing, is I can't find skilled people to come help me keep this business going. I can't find the people I need to do the work that we have available to us right now. And this is directly getting at that problem. And if you look back at historical data for Mississippi, we did not have the same sort of out-migration, brain drain problem, according to census data, before 1990 or so that we've got right now. This is a pretty new phenomenon. And we had a small population back then, but people, for the most part, if they were growing up in Mississippi, were staying in Mississippi.
Yeah.
And now things have changed a whole lot, and folks are leaving. One thing that we wanted to do in the report, after we proved with data that this was a problem, we wanted to say, all right, well, what are the majors who are actually staying here, and what are the majors who are struggling to find jobs here or just not staying here? And we see that teachers very frequently are staying here. Any kind of education degree, any kind of nursing degree, typically those folks are staying here, even though we have a nursing shortage still. If you look at the opposite end of the spectrum, you're seeing folks like philosophy majors. Now, I love philosophy majors. I'm about to lose the vote of every philosophy major listening right now. But look, maybe we should think about redirecting our investment in higher education to fields and majors that can have jobs here in the economy that we have in Mississippi. Maybe we should gear our money toward those kinds of folks who can actually find employment in the state, and then let's nudge them to stay in the state too. I mean, that's the other part of this, is we're producing some graduates like general business majors, chemical engineers who are going out of state. Those are the kinds of folks who we need to be in their face saying, look, here are the advantages of staying in Mississippi. And we should also, frankly, be talking about incentive programs, sort of like the military. If you'll agree to stay in Mississippi for a little while, we'll pay for a chunk of your education.
Totally agree.
We get something from you at the end of it, but we're going to give you something to stay here, too. Those are the kinds of things that we could be discussing. But at the very least, the time to start this conversation and act is now. We've got to get on this now.
Totally agree. But aligning the money that is supporting the pursuit of certain degrees with the needs in the workplace, that just makes common sense.
Absolutely.
That's just common sense.
Maybe a few less sociology majors. Apologies to the sociology majors out there. Maybe a few more folks who can actually find employment here in the state of Mississippi. This is something our universities ought to be thinking about. And then on the demand side, I hope more folks will do what we're doing in the auditor's office now. We have a new fellowship called the Stay in the SIP Fellowship. We were having trouble recruiting young accountants straight out of school. So what we did is we said, look, if you've done 2 years of your accounting degree, we'll pay for the other 2 or your master's in accountancy. And in exchange, you got to come work for the state auditor's office for at least 2 years. Gerard, we went from having 0 potential recruits before we launched that program to over 20 highly qualified resumes sitting on my desk. We're not going to be able to hire all 20 of them, but I can tell you we've got 5 already that we've identified that we can hire, 1 from the University of Mississippi where I spoke yesterday.
That's awesome.
So we want to show that this can work, and if it can work for us, then it can work for other private employers. It can work for other public employers. It can work in the STEM fields, engineering, computer science. This is part of the pathway forward, is talking about solutions and getting to work right now.
You know, Auditor, when I was graduating, that was a long time ago, I know, but we used to have placement offices at the universities located and staff that help connect graduates with employers. And I realized that our digital world, maybe the need for that is somewhat diminished, but perhaps it would make sense to invest a little on the state's part in some staff, some sort of business unit that would be located on the university campuses, whose job it would be to recruit people to stay in Mississippi. To graduates. I mean, just thinking out of this is just the example, the kind of conversations when everything is available. We have a whiteboard here.
That's right.
And just start putting up ideas.
Well, we know we're losing tax revenue when these folks leave.
Exactly.
Right? So let's find a way to keep that tax revenue here. And if it means investing in an office like that at a university, Let's make them prove that they're worth the investment. Let's make them show us a return and show us that they're keeping folks here so that we can get the tax revenue off of it. I'll tell you one other thing that's come to mind as this report has played out. One thing we saw is that we looked at where folks were moving and working after they graduated from a Mississippi public university if they did stay here. And one thing that we saw is that 30% of public university graduates were working in Hinds County, 30%. The next highest county was Harrison County at 6%. Right. So the Jackson metro area is a huge magnet for public university graduates. And if Jackson specifically continues to be the per capita homicide capital of the United States, our biggest magnet is going to shut off. That is a huge danger for us. If we're going to succeed as a state, Jackson is going to have to succeed too. We've got other great areas, Tupelo, DeSoto County, the coast, Hattiesburg, our college towns. A lot of good places to move here in the state of Mississippi. But it's just like Atlanta and Georgia or Nashville and East Tennessee. If Atlanta doesn't succeed, Georgia's not going to succeed. If Nashville doesn't succeed, East Tennessee's not going to succeed. If Jackson doesn't succeed, Mississippi is not going to succeed. So we have got to figure out the leadership situation in Jackson and solve some of these very basic problems like rampant crime, water that you cannot drink, roads that you cannot drive on, and schools that you don't want to send your kids to, or that magnet is going to turn off and it's going to be bad. So
true. I think so often those of us that live the majority of the state outside of the capital city just almost write it off. But the fact is, it affects the whole state.
Bingo.
The capital city, Hinds County, the most populous county, the most populous city, and the capital city more specifically, more explicitly, that affects us all.
Yes.
It affects us all.
Well, just take crime, for example. If you have a problem with people who commit a crime, get arrested, and get let out on some sort of catch-and-release program, and we've seen that here in Jackson recently for a variety of different reasons, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that guy who gets out like that can hop in a car and go to Meridian and commit more crime.
Absolutely.
He can hop in a car and go to Columbus and commit more crime, or go to Vicksburg or somewhere else. So crime doesn't just stay here. It will spill over eventually. And I'll tell you this too, my dad's an oil field pumper in Jones County. I remember him saying growing up at one point, why do we care what goes on in Jackson? We don't live there. Well, now, because Jackson has become such a magnet for public university graduates, his two kids live in the Jackson metro area. I live in Flowood. My sister lives in Madison County. So you have to start caring what goes on in our biggest city because you're going to have family here. And even if you don't have family here, the crime problem specifically is going to spread. So we've got to figure out these basic fundamental functions of government, how to have a good capital city, how to have universities that funnel graduates back to Mississippi employers, how to convince those young people to stay here and reinvest in their communities. If we can't figure out this basic stuff, we're in trouble. If we can figure it out, I think Mississippi has more potential than any other state in the entire country.
I agree.
We're constantly underestimated, constantly the underdog, and we have incredibly talented people here. You and I have met a ton of them.
Yep.
We're going to shock the world in 10 or 20 years with what we can accomplish if we get serious about fixing our biggest challenges.
I totally agree, but as you have rightly pointed out, and I think your report has brought it into focus, we ain't even been talking about it that much, honestly.
Right.
It's not really made it onto the radar at the level it should be, because I guess it's not considered a critical problem that's got to be addressed like right now today. Yeah. But it's been inching this way, and it's been graduating to this for quite some time. And we're going to wake up, and it is going to be a serious, almost catastrophic situation if we don't address this. I'll tell you the reason
why I think it's bubbling up as a problem now, as opposed to even 5 years ago. Right now, we have a national labor shortage.
Yeah.
Right. So everybody's trying to figure out how to get workers, even in populated areas, in places where folks want to move. They're trying to figure out, businesses there are trying to figure out, how do I get workers?
Yeah.
It's going to be worse here in Mississippi if we're bleeding people at the same time that there's a national labor shortage. So now's the time to plant the tree and actually start working on this.
And I'll leave this thought as well as we bump out here. The capital city, prospective employers, businesses looking to expand into Mississippi, they see and they pay attention to what happens in the largest and capital city.
Yes.
It enters in, even though they may not be located around it, it still factors into their decision making.
Yes.
You agree?
Absolutely, 100%.
That's why we got to fix it. We got to keep working on this, Auditor.
Yeah.
And we got to keep. And I appreciate you bringing it to the forefront for the public, and hopefully our government will get on this as well.
Thank you for letting me talk about it. I appreciate it.
Thank you for coming in. Auditor Shad White has been our guest on Middays. We'll take a break here and come right back.